Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name's John. By the time you'll be seeing this, it is 2026, January 1st, which means another year of Historathon, another beginning to the whole event, and another quarter one. So, what I've done is I've put together some books that I think you might be interested in, but just a few preliminary things before I get into it. If you hear fireworks in the background, that's because I stupidly waited too long to film this video. It's not even 9 o'clock right now, but some people in the neighborhood are very pyrotechnically happy. So I don't live in a war zone. They're just fireworks. Secondly, this is not so much a TBR. Every list I put together is, we sort of call them affectionately, piles of possibilities. They're not things that I'm necessarily marrying myself to. I will probably read a few of these things, and I will read a few things that aren't in this list of books. But these, more than anything else, are just ideas for you rather than a definite list of things I want to read. What you can expect to find here, mostly cultural, social, and intellectual history from a mixture of popular presses and university presses. And if none of these books really tickle your fancy, you're more than welcome to go to the drop-down box and find the links to the 3 previous quarter ones that Historathon has had from the years 2023, 2024, and 2025. Excuse me. And each of those will have another list of 10 to 15 books from quarter one that will maybe inspire you, give you something to think about. So, that said, I have 10 books, and let's just jump into them here. This first one is something I got from Princeton University last year when they had their sale. This is The 5 Million Year Odyssey, The Human Journey from Ape to Agriculture by Peter Bellwood. And this is sort of a big sweeping introduction to primate evolution from our earliest years in Africa, about 5 million years ago, to the rise of Homo sapiens, which happened only about 300,000 years ago. And kind of synthesizes contributions from biology, anthropology, archaeology, linguistics, a bunch of different fields of scientific endeavor to tell the story of how repeated migrations and evolution shaped early modern culture and eventually culminated in the invention or the rise of human agriculture, which happened about 10,000 years ago. So, The 5 Million Year Odyssey by Peter Bellwood. This I pretty much am married to because we're reading it as a group. So this is something the University of Chicago came out with over the summer. And they sent me an uncorrected proof. Might have to hit them up for a final version, but this is Penelope's Bones, a new history of Homer's world through the women written out of it by Emily Hauser. And Hauser uses the lives of women that we find in Greek mythology, women like Helen of Troy, Briseis, Athena, Penelope, and others, to reconstruct the lives of real historical women. So she's using mythology as a kind of jumping off point, and then combining it, kind of like with what Peter Bellwood does in The 5 Million Year Odyssey, with archaeology, genetics, and other kinds of scientific evidence to reconstruct and discuss the lives of real women from Homeric Greece. Penelope's Bones by Emily Hauser. Next up is a book I've had for a while. I love this imprint. They are from Princeton University Press. I've talked about them a few times. They are zone books. You can see right there. They all kind of have this presentation. They are known for being on the scholarly side and also very, very interdisciplinary, which I appreciate both. This is a book by Marcel Détienne, who looks at the Greek concept of aletheia, or aletheia, which is kind of the Greek word for truth, but it has other mystical, religious connotations. It means more like unconcealment or unforgetting. Notice that the word Lethe is in there, like the river Lethe, the mythological Greek river of forgetfulness. In Greece, Détienne argues that before the rise of Socratic philosophy, aletheia was tied to three important roles: the role of the bard poet, the diviner, and the just king. And how aletheia changed, and therefore the concept of truth really changed, and how it slowly gave way to something more secular and rationalistic than we see in Homeric Greece. Next up is another publisher I really like, and it still has the cellophane wrapping on it because, well, obviously I haven't read it, but I always stare at it for quarter one and ask myself, is this the quarter that I should finally read this? This is Christianity and Classical Culture, and the subtitle there is, in case you can't make it out, it is A Study of Thought and Action from Augustus to Augustine by Charles Norris Cochrane. This originally came out in 1940, so it's been around for a while. And it looks at the ways in which Christianity influenced classical culture between the times of the two people in the subtitle, between Augustus and Augustine. And he argues that the rise of Christianity addressed questions of human meaning and human purpose in ways that are more, in ways that rationalism in Greece and the classical world more broadly couldn't really do, failed to do even, which had a big reason in the long-term success of Christianity. And if you disagree with the thesis, come for Charles Norris Cochrane. Don't come for me. I'm just the messenger. I also have a bunch of old Oxford World Classics and Penguin Classics of Greek and Roman stuff that I have never read. And so I just picked one that really spoke to me, mostly because it's actually two books in one, and they're both very short. I'm talking 30 or 40 pages apiece, and there's two of them. This is by Tacitus, and this is his Agricola and his Germania, or Germany in English. Before Tacitus became the historian and big-time Roman senator, man about town, he wrote two short works, both around the year 98 AD. The Germania is a work of ethnography, which looks at the German tribes which were living on the border of the Roman Empire at the time, and describes their customs, laws, byways, mores, stuff like that, everything you would associate with an ethnography. And the Agricola is a very short biography, I mean on the order of 30 or 40 pages, of Tacitus's father-in-law, actually, whose name was Gaius Julius Agricola, who was the Roman governor of Britain for several years, also largely responsible for the Roman conquering of Britain, and apparently praises him to high heaven, as you would probably anticipate, for his masculine virtue and his leadership ability and all that good stuff. So, Oxford World Classics version of Tacitus's Agricola and Germania. So these book tags sometimes have a horrible habit of making me feel my age. I don't know if anyone remembers Borders, but Borders went out of business in the United States, at least, in the summer of 2011. And I bought this at Borders. There's the sticker, and still haven't read it. This is The Inheritance of Rome, Illuminating the Dark Ages by Chris Wickham. This is one of the volumes in, which series is it? The Penguin History of Europe. And this is one of my passive-aggressive attempts on this list to kind of anticipate quarter two, which I much prefer to quarter one. Because notice the dates here. This 400 to, it's 1,000, right? Yeah, 400 to 1,000. So technically starting in quarter one, but it's very much quarter two period heavy. But I included it here because I'm ready for the Middle Ages and Renaissance already. But this looks at societies and cultures that grew up in the wake of Rome's collapse and reimagines Europe as an area of dynamic change and recovery instead of the decadence and decline that are associated with the term Dark Ages. Dark Ages is kind of a no-no phrase these days, at least among historians. They'd also probably appreciate if us non-historians didn't use it either. It actually applies to the relative lack of sources, not intellectual decline. But the phrase itself kind of connotes both. So that's why it's less and less popular with each passing year. It looks at the Byzantine Empire, Ireland, Abbasid Baghdad, Umayyad Cordoba, the Carolingians, the Merovingians, all the usual suspects, to show how these cultures sort of clung on to Roman ways, sometimes for the purpose of political legitimation, to create the complex set of emerging states that grew out of the high to late Middle Ages. The Inheritance of Rome by Chris Wickham. Another book I've had, I think I bought at when a store around here, a bookstore, was going out of business nearly a decade ago. I think the author is a radio or television presenter in England. I could be wrong about that. Maybe someone will let me know in the comments. But it's by Lucy Hughes Hallett, and it's called Heroes, Saviors, Traitors, and Supermen, A History of Hero Worship. And it's basically a cultural history of heroes, hero worship, our need for them, how we see heroes in Western civilization, looking at people like Achilles and Odysseus, who I know are not historical figures, but it also looks at Alcibiades and Cato the Younger, who definitely are historical figures, and as El Cid, Francis Drake, Wallenstein, and Garibaldi. So definitely leaning into Alcibiades and Cato the Elder, at least for quarter one, but this is something you could dip into for the entire year because it covers all of the quarters pretty much. And Lucy Hughes Hallett looks at how and why we have hero worship, why we have heroes, and why some of these heroes are not exactly deserving of being turned into heroes. There's that old saying, don't read about your heroes, or something of that effect. So I'm willing to break the rule for this simply because it looks like a series of interesting case studies. Each chapter is one specific hero. So I'm very interested in that. Okay, 3 more books. I got this a while ago too. This is from the University of, there we go, Chicago. And this is by the late French intellectual historian Alain Besançon. And this is The Forbidden Image, an intellectual history of iconoclasm. This is basically a look at the broad range of attitudes towards religious images as a source of status and authority that we've had throughout Western civilization, from their veneration, which was called iconophilia, to their rejection, which was called iconoclasm. From the Greeks through the modern age. Had it for a long time. Is this the year? I don't know. We'll see. Every year, I like to include a little bit of something that isn't so much history. It's not about a historical event or set of events, not the Crusades or World War II or the Peloponnesian War, or not that all history is war in the first place, but you know what I mean. But something that's more oriented along the lines of historiography, thinking about history in a larger sense, why it's important, how we have thought about history, of certain historical events, how that historical understanding has changed over time, sort of the meta-historical questions. That stuff really interests me. And also from Liberty Fund, also still in its cellophane wrapping. I went on a Liberty Fund buying kick a few years ago and bought just too much. Read several of them, but several of them have also just been sitting in my library for too long. This is by Michael Oakeshott, and it is his book of selected essays pulled from other places. I don't think this is published as a book by him, but this is just called On History and Other Essays. Oakeshott was a political philosopher who also wrote about topics in historiography and the philosophy of history, and might be mostly known for an essay he wrote, I think back in the 50s, called Rationalism in Politics. And like I said, this is from Liberty Fund. I've mentioned them several times on the channel. And this is just a series of 5 essays that explores questions in the area of history of philosophy, historiography, what those questions mean for historical understanding and the understanding of ourselves, why history is important, stuff like that. Also, relatively short if you're interested in a topic as much as I am. Sorry for the glare. And last, a book that I got at Rutgers University Press last year or the year before. This is by the great 20th century classicist Moses Finley. It is called Democracy, Ancient and Modern. This originally came out in 1973, and it is a comparative study of basically what ancient Greek democracy looked like and what democracy looks like. Probably mostly he's looking at 20th century America here, I guess. But ancient Greek democracy being this face-to-face, highly participatory kind of democracy, and how that contrasts with modern representative democracies, which are a little bit more atomized, a little bit more mediated by cultural and social elites. and what those differences mean for how democracy functions for societies. So, this actually was a collection. This has 5 essays in it, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 5 essays in it that were published as a collection by Finley when he was still alive. So, Democracy, Ancient and Modern by Moses Finley, or M.I. Finley as he's often referred to. And that's what I have. I look forward to seeing everyone else's list. If you have any comments or questions about the books that I've shown, if you've read any of the books that I've shown, definitely let me know in the comments. And I can't wait to start Historathon 2026. It's going to be a wonderful year. I'll talk to everyone later.